Hello, and welcome to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Services Rochester Area podcast. My name is Jan Heineman, and today I'll be reading to you from the Rochester Beacon. Our first story from the Beacon comes from writer David Wazana and is dated July 13th. Alley revitalization effort underway in Rochester. Last month, Borer Alley in the Inner Loop North hosted Liven Up the Alley, an event meant to draw attention to efforts at revitalizing Rochester's alleys. Organized by Hinge Neighbors, the event showcased some of the findings of an ongoing study conducted by City Hall. At the helm is David Riley, Rochester's principal transportation specialist. At Liven Up the Alley, attendees saw Rochester's side streets at their full potential. Artists completed spray paint pieces, children rode their bikes, and parents had the opportunity to speak to Riley about making the alley safer and more convenient walking areas. I certainly came in aware of some issues on alleys, but talking with folks who live with them, I learned a little bit more about some of the problems that they see or are looking for the city to address, said Riley, who cited illegal dumping and traffic as primary concerns. I've certainly seen litter on alleys, but residents say they really seem to sometimes be a magnet for illegal dumping because they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. Hinge Neighbors, a nonprofit dedicated to fostering community involvement in major projects in the Inner Loop, helped to kickstart the study in Borer Alley. The alley, located north of the Inner Loop between Scio and North Streets, was overgrown and being used as an illegal dumping ground. Suzanne Mayer, who along with Sean Dunwoody is a co-founder of Hinge Neighbors, says, "We thought, well, if we could walk down this alley and clean it up, it would be great. So we talked to the police, we talked to the neighborhood service center and the inspector, and the police said, don't go walking down there by yourself, please. We got the illegal trash dumping cleaned up," she says. "We had neighborhoods involved, parents from the Lewis Street YMCA were involved, and we got it looking better. And once people realized we keep trying to keep it clean, dumping didn't happen." The study began officially in August 2025, expanding on Hinge's efforts to develop cost-effective, practical ways to revitalize alleys citywide. Riley says, "I would partly credit Hinge with adopting an alley and putting it on our radar. They had requested or made a number of suggestions or requests for different kinds of improvements to Borer Alley. That got us thinking, hey, this is only one alley among many. It's great that there's a group that's kind of taking charge of this one, but let's take a more comprehensive look citywide at what we could be doing with alleys and try to develop a kind of consistent approach across all the neighborhoods so that we're not treating one a lot differently than another." Key concerns examined by the study are making alleys more pedestrian-friendly, safe, and clean. If successful, the initiative will improve bike and pedestrian connections and green infrastructure and reduce unwanted activities associated with alleys while maintaining necessary functions like pedestrian access and deliveries. Project managers for the study worked with community members to identify infrastructure and safety issues such as lack of lighting, speeding drivers, and illegal trash dumping. The city also spoke with Rochester's police and fire departments to ensure that emergency services wouldn't be compromised by the project's improvements, as well as with business owners with alley-adjacent properties. Riley says about conversations with the RPD and the RFD, there's a balance to be found there between traffic calming, which has a safety benefit, but also making sure that we're maintaining emergency response. So if it is on a busier corridor, we might have a different kind of approach to the design. After completion, expected by the end of the summer, the study will be used by the city to apply for grants to fund revitalization efforts. With no specific funding goal in mind, Riley hopes that the study will also be able to identify priority areas for improving alleyways depending on the amount received for the initiative. He says, I think what this study will give us is kind of some thoughts on how to prioritize maintenance and improvements to alleys. So, recognizing that there are 60 plus alleys across the city, how do we prioritize which ones have the most immediate need to work on? And that'll include a lot of different factors. It'll include the condition of pavement and infrastructure, and are there drainage issues and things like that. But I think we would also look at what's going on in the community. Is there kind of a place-making effort underway that a project could help support? Is there potential for that kind of thing that we want to try to foster in a neighborhood? In addition to infrastructure improvements managed by the city, Hinge Neighbors is working to include local artists and community members in the project. It views alley revitalization as part of a broader placemaking and affordability goal. In fact, Hinge's early work cleaning Borer Alley stemmed from efforts to encourage property owners along the alley to build auxiliary dwelling units for more affordable housing. Dunwoody of Hinge Neighbors says, from listening to people who wanted affordable homes, we were trying to figure out how to do that along the alleyway. Once again, community, social justice, home ownership, and connecting to neighbors because the alleyways used to function for people. I used to hang out in Borer Alley and barbecue and work on cars, and everybody would talk and hang out, he adds. But since the demise of neighborhoods and the removal of garages and auxiliary dwelling units in that area, the alley became a shady area. Dunwoody compares his vision for Rochester's alleys to mews, traditional alley-side auxiliary dwellings in parts of Europe, featuring lower-level garages or stable houses with living space above. Project organizers also turned for inspiration to other cities like Detroit, where urban revitalization projects, including alley revitalization projects like the one taking place in Rochester, are helping reverse the city's reputation for high crime and decay. Similar urban revitalization efforts across the country, propelled by a desire among younger residents for community-oriented development, have emphasized walkability, place-making, mixed-use development, affordability, and an eyes-on-the-street approach to public safety. Rochester 2034, the city's blueprint for future development, is keeping with national trends in urban revitalization, stressing the importance of public transit accessibility, place-making, and social and economic justice. The Alley Revitalization Project, though not officially a part of Rochester 2034, fits with the plan's larger goals, Riley says. He singles out Alley's potential for expanding walkability and public transit access. He says, Rochester 2034 definitely puts an emphasis on trying to improve our bike network and make this a more walkable city. I think that alleys certainly can help with making connections between streets and bike facilities, or getting from a trail to a street or from a cycle track to a bike lane. So I think they're part of that bigger picture. I think making these more walkable places is part of that big picture too. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer David Wazana, who is a Rochester Beacon contributing writer and a member of the Oasis Project's second cohort. The Oasis Project is the Beacon's internship program. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon, also from writer David Wazana, is dated July 14th. Kiva Rochester reaches 10-year mark. The City of Rochester's Kiva Small Business Loan Program has facilitated more than $1.6 million in loans since its inception in 2016. The program, which marked its 10th anniversary this week, provides microloans to local entrepreneurs. City officials say the Rochester Kiva program has established itself as a national leader in crowd-funded capital, ranking among the highest performing U.S. Kiva cities in both community loan endorsements and total lending volume. Mayor Malik Evans said at an event commemorating the anniversary, "Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, creating jobs, driving innovation, and improving neighborhoods and the families who live in them. When we invest in Rochester's entrepreneurs, we invest in Rochester's future." Kiva Rochester directly drives financial inclusion by prioritizing support for women and minority-owned businesses and helping to build credit. In addition to strengthening the small business economy, the program aims to build sustainable wealth in historically underserved communities by removing traditional financial barriers. Evans said, "Kiva Rochester does more than just level the playing field. It directly drives financial inclusion by prioritizing women and minority-owned businesses and removing traditional financial barriers like credit scores and collateral. Kiva approaches lending from a character standpoint. It allows entrepreneurs to prove their creditworthiness with the help of family and friends, and they can support their business ideas to the point that they will invest in them and themselves." Andre Morrison is a 2-time loan recipient for his company's Red Horse Transportation, a non-emergency medical transport service, and Andre's Barbershop, located on Portland Avenue, which recently hosted Cuts for Peace. Morrison says, "We are part of the community. We're a pillar of the community, and it feels good to be part of the community. And we thank Kiva for helping us out to make that dream come true." For Jacori Smith, Kiva helped her crowdfund $8,000 for her juice shop. "Having a vision is one thing," she says, "but having the funding to build the business is a challenge that can be extremely discouraging. With the help of Kiva Rochester, I was able to crowdfund $8,000 for my business that allowed me to purchase equipment, prepare my space, and I got a step closer to my grand opening. Today, Beautifully Nourished Juicery is open, and I am forever grateful to my city. It showed me that this city believed in my dream just as much as I do." Other beneficiaries of Kiva loans Present at the event included Stephanie Armstrong, CEO of Moxie Creative Studios, Crystal Chapman, founder of C&B Elegant Events, and Marquita Rugless, CEO of Rock Events. Kiva, founded in 2005, is a global crowd-funded micro-lending platform through which individuals can lend as little as $25 to support entrepreneurs. Businesses can access zero-interest loans of $1,000 to $15,000 with no fees, no collateral, and no minimum credit score requirements. The Kiva application process focuses on social capital rather than traditional credit checks. Borrowers first complete an application, then invite a small number of friends and family to make initial loan contributions to demonstrate creditworthiness, and finally enter a public crowdfunding phase in which millions of global Kiva lenders can support the project. Mayor Evans said, "All of you that have gotten Kiva loans, all of you that have contributed to Kiva, it's up to us to be the ambassadors of that program, to tell someone that might be on the edge, thinking about how they're going to do their next business, apply for a Kiva loan." I want to say in a year and a half or two, we're going to get over that $2 million mark, and it's going to be time for another party. That from Mayor Malik Evans. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer David Wazana, and you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Smriti Jacob and is dated July 14th. NSF picks region as National Hub for Laser Research. The National Science Foundation has selected the Rochester Finger Lakes region as a national hub for laser innovation. The University of Rochester-led project will launch with $15 million in federal funds over the next 2 years. The award for science, technology, and engineering for laser and laser applications research will be matched by $16 million in state funds over a 6-year period. The coalition is one of the latest 12 U.S. teams across 20 states to receive an NSF Regional Innovation Engines Award, officials say. The program is intended to build and scale new innovation clusters that accelerate the development of critical technologies and grow regional economies. The Stellar project will establish a technology and innovation cluster focused on laser technologies, education, business expansion and attraction, manufacturing, and workforce development. Brian Stone, who's performing the duties of the NSF director, says, NSF Engine's investments in critical technologies and future industries will transform America's innovation infrastructure for decades to come. The NSF Stellar Engine will strengthen U.S. competitiveness in global markets by advancing lasers and laser application research for manufacturing, defense, communication, and healthcare. The Stellar project's key partners include the Institute of Optics and Laboratory for Laser Energetics at URochester, Rochester Institute of Technology, Monroe Community College, NextCore, Greater Rochester Enterprise, Americom, and New York State. More than 90 organizations, including industry, higher education, startups, state and local governments, venture capital, and nonprofits, have offered collaboration and support for the initiative. UR President Sarah Mangelsdorf says, "This is a tremendous moment for the University of Rochester, our region, and the American public. On behalf of the university community, we are gratified that our regional leaders have demonstrated that we have the talent and the teamwork needed to reposition our nation at the forefront of laser research, development, and manufacturing." The demand for laser products, from smartphones to complex defense systems, is on the rise. However, production is largely overseas. Other nations, including China, are investing heavily in emerging laser technologies. The Stellar project is expected to sharpen our nation's competitive edge. Sujatha Ramanujan, Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer of NextCore's Luminate Accelerator, says, "Lasers are critical for everything from everyday medical devices to quantum technology. But the U.S. relies too much on lasers manufactured abroad. This investment to develop the Rochester Finger Lakes region as a laser research and development hub will bolster national security, open new career pathways, and ensure America remains at the vanguard of technology." The region's strength in optics, photonics, imaging, and laser supply chain companies is well known. It houses more than 150 companies in those fields, as well as educational institutions with expertise in developing the next generation of scientists and the workforce. Thomas Brown, director of University of Rochester's Institute of Optics and Stellar principal investigator, says, "The same region that led revolutions in photography, xerography, optical physics, and precision optics is ideally positioned to lead the future of laser technology. Pound for pound, Rochester's brainpower in optics, photonics, imaging, and laser technology is unmatched, and we're immensely grateful for the support to help lead a national resurgence in laser technology." The seeds for Stellar were sown in 2023 when URochester received $1 million to plan the proposal. The project was ultimately selected in a process that began with nearly 300 letters of intent. Stellar could eventually receive up to $160 million over the next decade. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer and managing editor Smriti Jacob, and you are listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Brody Martin and is dated July 14th. Rochester Fringe Festival reveals lineup. The ESL Rochester Fringe Festival will feature more than 700 performances in its 15th edition. The event takes place September 15th through 26th across 45 venues. This was a record-breaking year for applications, organizers say, resulting in returning favorites, festival debuts, and U.S. premieres in many genres. While the fest hosts acts from all over the world, it also serves as an annual spotlight for local talent to showcase their work to thousands of people, thanks in large part to the accessible, no-cost application process. Tom Rogers, ESL president and CEO, says, "As we celebrate our second year as title sponsor of the ESL Rochester Fringe Festival, we're pleased to stand alongside a festival that has become an honored tradition in Rochester's arts landscape. We stepped up last year because we believe in everything that Fringe Fest stands for. This year, Fringe brings Circus in the City, or as organizers call it, a festival within a festival. Supported by an Empire State Development grant, Circus in the City will include free outdoor events, circus arts, street theater, and interactive experiences. This will also be the first large-scale collection of outdoor circus performances in Western New York, organizers say. Also new this year is the Garden Studio, a second performing arts space added to Dawn's Spiegel Garden at One Fringe Place. The Garden Studio is a small theater space that offers a more intimate environment for shows with up to 60 audience members, according to organizers. Shows in the studio include Just to Be Close to You by Cam Porter and Tea Party at the End of the World, where guests are presented with exquisite tea and parlor games. Erica Fee, founding producer and CEO, notes, "Sometimes people tell me that Fringe is kind of overwhelming, but that's the point," she says. The Spiegel Tent, a jewel box theater, will continue to host some Fringe shows, including the Edinburgh Fringe Festival cult hit, titled A Young Man Dressed as a Gorilla, Dressed as an Old Man, Sits Rocking in a Rocking Chair for 56 minutes and then leaves. Comedian Pete Davidson, announced as this year's headliner in June, will perform at Kodak Hall. The organization is in the final stages of raising funds for the first Fringe comprehensive campaign. It has raised 84% of the $1.575 million goal. The funds will help acquire a rare Spiegel tent, a distinctive performing arts venue. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Brody Martin, who's a recent graduate of Nazareth University and a member of the Oasis Project's third internship cohort. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Beacon comes from writer Narm Nathan and is dated July 14th. DHS expanding ICE detention facility in Batavia. The Buffalo Service Processing Center in Batavia is undergoing an expansion. The facility will add 100 beds, the Department of Homeland Security says. The move comes in response to recent New York State legislation that prohibits ICE from detaining individuals in county jails statewide. A DHS statement reads, "The facility will provide a safe, secure, and humane environment for individuals in ICE custody and will operate in accordance with applicable national detention standards." That's from DHS. The statement adds, "As with all ICE detention facilities, detainees will have access to comprehensive medical care, mental health services, legal access, religious accommodations, recreation, and other required services. The facility will be subject to the same oversight, inspection, and operational requirements that govern ICE detention facilities nationwide." The Batavia facility is New York's largest and only Immigration and Customs Enforcement-run immigration detention center with 650 beds. The facility has long experienced overcrowding, with over 100 detainees beyond capacity in late 2025. In a letter addressed to DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen, Governor Kathy Hochul asked for more details about the agency's plans for expansion in the state. In Rochester, short-term detention holding cells are being constructed at the Kenneth B. Keating Federal Building. DHS has also leased a warehouse in Newburgh, which reports suggest could be used for a detention facility. The letter reads from Kathy Hochul, "My longstanding policy has always been that we will cooperate with law enforcement when crimes have been committed and there is a warrant for arrest or a court order. But this unbridled aggression against law-abiding New Yorkers must stop." New York has recently pushed back against federal immigration enforcement through statewide legislation that limits collaboration with local law enforcement agencies, prevents the use of county jails for detention, and allows New York citizens to sue federal, state, and local government officials for violating their constitutional rights. Hochul wrote, "So I ask, is your department building or expanding immigration detention facilities in New York? If so, where, to what capacity, and under what authority? Is this being done at your direction despite President Trump's commitment that ICE enforcement operations in New York would not be expanded unless requested by the governor?" That from Kathy Hochul to Department of Homeland Security. No answer to that question yet. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Narm Nathan, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer and a member of the Oasis Internship Project's inaugural cohort. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn and is dated July 15th. Tree removal begins at Brighton Town Hall. On July 9th, crews cut down 2 mature locust trees on what will eventually be more parking lot space at the Brighton Town Hall. This action, part of a renovation project that has been controversial among some residents, came a week after opponents went to court in a bid to block the project. The town initiative began 2 years ago as an asbestos abatement and HVAC project and grew to include geothermal wells, a parking lot overhaul, refurbishment of the outdoor pool and pavilion, and construction of a splash pad and playground. The project is now in the second of 3 phases, adding more parking spaces, a raised speed table crosswalk, a fence for Brighton Police Department vehicles, and sidewalks at the northern edge. It will require 6 trees to be cut down, which include the 2 locust trees. So far, Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the renovations bear an estimated $13 million price tag. A coalition of former volunteer board members, county officials, and other community leaders have been highly critical of the project. Their grievances include environmental concerns, procedural issues, and accusations of skirting regulations. Serge Tzvasman, one of the group's key organizers, says, "It's not the way to do business in any town, let alone a town that says it's progressive." You can see the supervisor at 12 Corners last week at a No Kings rally, and here he's doing exactly that. Here you are protesting someone doing something at the reflecting pool or destroying the White House to put in a ballroom, and it's happening in our backyard. Tzvasman is a former town planning board member who has been joined by others, including Bill Price, George Smith, and John Osowski, several of whom resigned from their positions over this issue. On June 29th, the group launched an Article 78 proceeding, a type of lawsuit that challenges the decision of a local government agency as unlawful, unfair, or unreasonable. While it also sought a temporary stay order for the parking lot renovations, those have been rendered partially moot with the latest removal of trees on the site. Although the group is frustrated and disappointed at the trees' removal, they also believe this action could be a boon to their cause. An update posted to the group's online petition says, legally, moving forward with this destruction before a judge has even had the opportunity to rule does not weaken us. Instead, it strengthens our case and hardens our collective resolve. We are not giving up. The petitioner in the lawsuit is Jody McGarry, a resident whose home abuts the Brighton Town Hall. It specifically targets a May 18th decision by the town board to enter into a $4.48 million contract with the Zoldas Construction Company for its Phase 2 construction. The town of Brighton, the town board, and Supervisor Bill Maley are named as respondents. One argument of the Article 78 filing is that the planned construction will directly impact McGarry through, quote, loss of mature vegetative canopy, construction noise, dust, and vibration, increased impervious surface and altered drainage, and impacts on the use and enjoyment of the petitioner's home and the adjoining neighborhood connection, unquote. Further, since alterations to the plan required additional permits and public access closures, it argues that any state Environmental Quality Review Act reviews the project received and do not apply to the current plan. The suit also brings up other points often cited by critics of the plan, including that tree removal recommendations for Phase 2 by the Conservation Board were made with incomplete information, and that Phase 3 is currently undesigned, but depended on the previous phase. Zfassman says, all this added parking wasn't validated by any attempt to determine the requirements for Phase 3. There was some naivety early on, even before I joined the planning board, where it was assumed that through dialogue or pretense of dialogue, there could be a solution or a compromise in the town, but attempting to solve the issue in good faith failed. The suit was submitted by Jesse Capel, a New York City-based lawyer and Brighton High School alum. Zfassman says that although many local lawyers said there was a possible case in this matter, they did not want to represent his group due to potential conflicts of interest. A response to the lawsuit by Brighton Town attorney John Mancuso came a few days after the filing. It requests that the temporary work stay order be stricken and argues the entire case fails to meet the burden of proof for, quote, irreparable damage, unquote, in an Article 78 procedure. Mancuso wrote, McGarry's visual screening is entirely unfounded. As reflected on the map below, the work area and grading limits of the project are well outside the common boundary line between the town hall campus and the petitioner's property. No proposed tree clearing or vegetation removal is proposed along the petitioner's boundary line, whether as part of the project or otherwise. The provided map appears to include an area of the entire renovation project as it extends outside the previously shared Phase 2 boundary lines. For instance, 2 trees directly north of the town hall were not slated for removal in the town hall plans, but have been marked in this diagram. Since the town board issued a negative declaration in November 2024, which stated that the development will not have adverse environmental impacts, Mancuso's response argues that the petition's delayed complaint is further weakened. Mancuso writes, McGarry waited years for the construction of Phase 1 of the project and has been ongoing approximately 7 months since the last bond issuance and over a month since the town board awarded the construction contract for Phase 2 to the lowest responsible bidder before commencing this proceeding. Petitioner's delay is inexcusable and shows that there is, in fact, no irreparable harm. The court updated the petition today, that would be July 15th. Judge Sam Valerian has signed a motion for an order to show cause, scheduling an appearance for October 1st. The court will review affidavits, exhibits, and the proposed order in chambers without the parties present. The coalition opposed to the Town Hall project last month launched a GoFundMe campaign with a goal of $8,000 to pay for legal fees in this case. It has raised $2,117 so far and will continue to accept donations. The online petition has received 507 signatures. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer, and you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer David Wazana and is dated July 15th. RIT against ICE continues pressure campaign. In February, Rochester Institute of Technology freshman Chad Grant helped found RIT against ICE, along with other students and faculty members. The group today continues to pursue its goal to persuade the school's administration to divest from key companies that assist Immigration and Customs Enforcement in their operations through a nonviolent, on-campus pressure campaign. RIT Against ICE was formed as part of a larger campaign by the Association of American University Professors, an organization seeking to advance academic freedom and faculty input in higher education. AAUP's Schools Drop ICE campaign targets universities with connections to ICE, often through contracts with companies that provide logistical and material support for deportations. At the center of RIT Against ICE's campaign is a petition calling for an end to contracts between RIT and two companies with ties to ICE, Enterprise Rent-A-Car and Hilton Worldwide. At the time of writing, the petition had 1,168 signatures. The group hopes to get 4,000 signatures, or 20% of the campus's population of students, faculty, and staff. Grant says, "We identified Hilton and Enterprise as two corporations from the Drop ICE campaign national pressure list with ties to RIT. He adds that the university also has contracts with companies in the same industry sectors that aren't directly involved with ICE. So the idea is we get them to cut ties with those that are involved with ICE in order to punish the companies and force them to stop working with ICE via economic isolation." RIT officials declined to comment for this article. In Minneapolis early this year and in Los Angeles roughly a year ago, Enterprise and Hilton faced criticism for allegedly providing transportation and lodging, respectively, to ICE agents. Anti-ICE activists disrupted the agency's operations by making large reservations with Enterprise and later canceling them, thus denying ICE agents access to rental vehicles. Hotels where ICE agents were thought to be staying were targeted with late-night noise demonstrations, with activists playing loud music, chanting, and banging drums and pots. In January, a Hilton hotel in New York City was briefly occupied by demonstrators protesting the killing of Alex Pretty by ICE officers in Minneapolis. Despite support among a portion of the student body and faculty, RIT Against ICE claims that it has faced harassment at the hands of university administration. In one incident of alleged harassment, which was filmed by RIT Against ICE, student organizers with the group were approached by campus public safety officers while filming a promotional video for their petition. In the video, organizers walked around campus with a sign showing a QR code linking to the group's petition until public safety officers approached the students and, after asking for their IDs, informed them that they were not allowed to approach students to sign their petition or display signs inside RIT buildings without prior approval. According to the officer in the video, RIT Public Safety had received reports that they were approaching other students and canvassing inside an administration building during a university-run showcase event. RIT Against ICE posted an edited video of the interaction on social media, arguing that the incident was part of a broader administration effort to limit promotion of their petition on campus, and that they were not in violation of the school's freedom of speech policies. Grant says, the activist was extremely careful not to block walkways, and he only stopped for those who expressed their interest in signing the petition to him. He wasn't stopping people who didn't already show their interest. In another instance, student organizers of Icebreakers, a panel discussion on anti-ICE activism, organized by several official campus groups, were allegedly instructed by administrators and public safety officers not to mention RIT Against ICE's petition at that school-sanctioned event. Zach Jordan, another student organizer, says, we think that RIT is worried that once they concede a victory here, that we are going to keep pushing forward for more concessions. They seem afraid of having to change the culture of silence that's on campus. RIT is very content to claim a neutral ground, but it's very, very adamant on suppressing anything that will disrupt that claimed neutrality, which is, in fact, a stance of being pro these governmental contracts. Complicating matters is RIT Against ICE's unrecognized status as a campus group, which, according to organizers, hampers its ability to organize on-campus events. However, RIT Against ICE argues that recognition as an official campus group would limit its ability to endorse other non-school sanctioned events, campaigns, and organizations, citing the Icebreakers event as an example. Grant says, the Icebreakers panel discussion event changed from being a student club event in which they would have certain freedoms to have guest speakers say what they wanted, to an event under the administration-run Mosaic Center. Because it's an administration-run center, The administration can get control over what the panel speakers can say, as well as the general direction of audience conversations. RIT Against ICE organizers plan to continue their campaign into the fall semester. Grant says the organization plans to become a more visible presence in student life as a means of achieving its broader goals of campus democratization. We're going to make it part of the culture, he says. We're not just going to be a political campaign. We're going to be having fun events where people can come and talk about it and make it a communal activity. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer David Wazana, and you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn and is dated July 16th. 4th of July violence obscures progress on crime. A violent 4th of July weekend overshadowed what otherwise has been a remarkable decline in reported crime in Rochester. About 2 hours after the city's fireworks display ended, a massive fight broke out near Parcel 5. The Rochester Police Department says over 50 shots were fired, wounding 7 people, and another person was stabbed. No one was killed in the chaos, a fact that RPD Chief David Smith credited to a quick emergency response that was able to apply tourniquets to wounded individuals. Smith said during a news conference about the incident, "Our officers performed heroically Saturday night. Had it not been for the extra resources we had, it potentially could have been far worse." 3 arrests were made by RPD. Investigators are still seeking information about the incident from eyewitnesses. Mayor Malik Evans says, "As a result of the RPD's actions, I'm standing here not saying that we have any deaths, that we don't have any homicides. But what we do have is mayhem that is extremely unacceptable." Sadly, we are not alone, he added, mentioning other cities with Independence Day violence, including Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Boston, Chicago, and Dayton. All the articles say, well, it's the 4th of July. This happens on the 4th of July. I want to say no. This should not happen on the 4th of July. It shouldn't happen in Rochester, and it should not happen elsewhere. In fact, this year's violence broke with recent history. Although 2023 has 6 shooting incidents recorded in a single night, Independence Day in 2024 and 2025 were both violence-free celebrations. The 4th of July violence this year came after another 3-month period of declining crime incidents in the city. Mid-year data continues the trend seen in the first quarter, particularly in firearms crimes. Evans said, "We've made great progress in terms of shootings in our community. We've had a great last couple of years from a numerical perspective. But even when one person is shot, it still has an effect on the broader community." In the first 6 months of 2026, Rochester had 5 homicides, the fewest at this point in the year for all of RPD's publicly available records, which stretch back to 2011. Only 1 this year has been by firearm, also the lowest number ever. The number of firearm victims overall mirrors this trend, with mid-year stats appearing like a side of a pyramid leading downward to 2026 from its apex in 2021 and 2022. While the exact reasons for this decline are still being studied, the surge in shootings and gun homicides occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. The 57 non-fatal shooting victims so far this year are the same as the pre-COVID year of 2018. Starting in 2022, Evans has instituted and renewed a gun violence state of emergency on a monthly basis. Evans said on July 5th, "Often people say, 'Why do you keep the gun violence emergency?' What you saw last night is a reason why we continue to do that. Because for every gun that we take off the street is one less person that thinks they can walk around carrying an illegal firearm, or someone else that's thinking about what they can do to escalate a dispute or get even." The measure allows Evans to mobilize services from a variety of city agencies with only mayoral authorization, regulate traffic, establish curfews, control pedestrian movement, and close places of amusement or individual businesses. Violent crime incidents, homicides, aggravated assaults, and robberies remain around the same level as the previous year. Midway through 2025, there were 547 reported crimes in those categories. This year, there were 553. These incidents continue to be concentrated in the North Clinton and Upper Falls neighborhoods, areas historically marked by proportionately high levels of violence. These areas are also marked by higher numbers of firearm-related crimes compared with the rest of the city, even as those incidents have decreased overall. The RPD patrol beat covering the eastern half of Center City has also been a high incidence area for violent crime this year. That area includes heavily trafficked areas like the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Park and the RTS Transit Center. Along with the gun violence state of emergency, studies on the flow of guns used in crimes have also been a strategy for Rochester. The firearm advocacy group Brady first released a gun trace data report in 2023 through a partnership with the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, an initiative led by then City Council member Willie Lightfoot. It released a follow-up to that report earlier this year. The original report attempted to trace guns used in crimes to the store where they were originally sold. However, the report also noted a large proportion of ghost guns, unserialized firearms built through kits that can be ordered online. The updated report found that following a 2022 law criminalizing the sale and possession of ghost guns, the number of such firearms on the street dropped. Ghost gun manufacturer Polymer 80 has since gone out of business, and the presence of its weapons in Rochester has dramatically decreased. Evans said, however, that ghost guns are still a problem in the city, noting that one of the recovered guns from the July 4th melee fell into that category. The 2026 report also found that 34% of recovered crime guns originated in-state, compared with 43% in the previous study. Still, Evans placed pressure on gun stores outside the city, but within Monroe County, at a press conference announcing that report. I find it troubling that some of our own neighbors and business owners from the suburbs of Rochester are supplying a significant number of illegal guns that end up in our city and are used in a crime, said Mayor Evans. Brendan Lewis, the owner of the Firing Pin, a gun shop in nearby Bergen, says he was disheartened but not surprised by Evans' comments, and released a public statement in response to the report. He writes, "There are mountains of regulations, both state and federal, that we all follow. Then there's the moral issue. We gun dealers understand that there are moral and ethical liabilities with these firearms. There's no one that respects these tools and advocates for the public to respect them more than us." To insinuate that dealers in the suburbs are intentionally supplying this pipeline with illegal guns is frankly insulting. We are not your enemy in this fight against violence. We want to be part of the solution. Give the industry a seat at the table so that we can all work together to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. The most likely victim of a gun crime is still male, 72%, and black, 74%. The mid-year crime statistics indicate that those aged 25 to 44 are the most likely, 44%, to be at risk. Smith of the RPD confirmed that a majority of the 4th of July victims were youths. The mayor is considering a curfew for young people. Evans said, "We cannot have instances of minors being unaccompanied and their parents are nowhere to be found. This 4th of July was Exhibit A of why something like this has to be explored. It has to be explored in the legal context to make sure that, number one, it sticks, number two, it's effective, and number three, that it's not just an empty promise." The city had a youth-based curfew from 2006 to 2009, which the Court of Appeals ruled unconstitutional in its final year. Evans says that the city's legal team is examining the feasibility of instituting one now. A quasi-curfew model was rolled out in 2024 under the gun violence state of emergency for the East End Entertainment District. It created a special zone within the area, barring people under 21 and closing the area's roads on Saturday nights. Similar to the gun violence state of emergency, the zone has been continually renewed and remains in place. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from contributing writer Jacob Schermerhorn. And you've been listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. My name is Jan Heineman. Thank you for listening today, and hope you can come back and listen again in the future.